Good evening. You're watching The Big Story with Haryanto Diman. I'm Olivia Quay.
Singapore reported 897 new COVID-19 cases as of noon today. 13 are Singaporeans and permanent residents. Migrant workers living in dormitories continue to be the most severely affected group, making up the majority of the remaining cases. The total count of confirmed cases here is now at 12,075.
Despite frequent calls for the public to stay at home and to act sensibly, some are still not taking safe distancing seriously. I spoke to Environment and Water Resources Minister Masagos Zulkifli earlier today, and he said these people fall into three categories: those who don't know, those who don't care, and those who remain defiant. Here's more from that interview. Give a daily update on the number of people who were fined for breaching circuit breaker rules, as well as those caught without a mask while out. What do you make of the numbers? Are you surprised, disappointed even, that there are still people not abiding by safe distancing and other measures?
Well, I would say that most people are staying home, but those who have been issuing fines for violating safety distancing measures, they fall into three categories. They are the don't know, don't care, or the defiant. And unfortunately, the number who are defiant, for them, we have to even call the police to ensure that the safety of our enforcement officers are not threatened.
Right. Minister, if the number of those who are still flouting the rules doesn't come down, do you believe the $300 fine for first offences should be increased?
Well, I don't want to get there. I think most importantly, we keep exhorting our society to basically stay home. And by and large, when we have reduced the number of essential services, as well as closing the car parks to our national parks, these measures have helped to bring down the numbers of people going out, and therefore, consequently, the number of people who would be violating the measures.
Right. Well, several of those violating the measures are the elderly. Why do you think this particular group is having difficulty adapting to the circuit breaker?
Well, I can understand that many of these elderly may feel cooped up at home. Most of this all the time before these COVID-19 measures took place, they've been free to go out anywhere around the neighborhood, meet friends, even sit alone in the park. But today for the days that until 1st of June, we are telling everybody to stay home. And I think loneliness is a little bit difficult to cope. But there are things that they can do, and we are also outreaching to this group with MSF to understand what is bugging them at home and what we can do to basically help them stay at home.
Right. So from the elderly, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. It was reported on Wednesday that 6 youths were fined for breaking safe distancing measures. Do you believe they are the exception rather than the norm? How have younger people adapted to it, actually?
Well, whether you're old or young, you should be staying home. And I think if you try to go out to basically break the curfew, you think it is fun, well, inevitably it may come to you being infected by the diseases or passing on to your friends. I think this is something you don't want to do. We have to get our youth to realize their acts of defiance or act of trying to push the pressure to meet each other. It will also inevitably cause the disease to be spread among themselves and then to their loved ones, and the consequence will be unbearable.
Right. Well, safe distancing enforcement officers have been deployed for several weeks now. Do you think these EOs and ambassadors could actually be weak links as well? What precautions do they take in terms of protection and distancing?
Well, we brief our EOs daily to make sure that if there are lapses or sometimes misunderstanding of what they need to do or how they should be going about their work, they get briefed properly. We are also happy that the public do feedback to us when these lapses happen. You know, we are human, and this is not the kind of job they do as part of their job description. and they are being deployed on the ground and learning as the situation evolves. But in any case, I think they're doing a good job, and their presence well understood and well accepted by the society, and many of them are being treated with respect.
Well, the police said they've seen a rise in the number of abuse cases to some 3,000 of these EOs and ambassadors. Why do you think these officers and ambassadors are met with such abuse?
Well, I think in our society, like I mentioned, the third bucket, the people who are defiant, will always be in society. And for this group of people, we warn them that we will bear on them the full extent of law if they become violent to our EOs. But more importantly, the rest of the people who are violated are those who sometimes don't know what are the new measures being put today or the next day. And then there are people also who don't care, but when you approach them, they comply.
Right. Well, when it comes to these matters, Muir takes a zero-tolerance approach. There are a number of penalties for causing hurt to EOs and ambassadors, including a jail term of up to 7 years, a fine and a caning. Minister, should punishments be made more severe if instances of abuse keep occurring?
Well, we have been asking the justice system to ensure that the punishment being meted out are done in a balanced way, whether it's to ensure there's deterrence, to ensure that the people who are being abused are also feeling that justice has been meted out. So we leave it to the justice system to do that. But at the end of the day, it's all up to us to keep our tempers down. Everyone is going through this problem together. And I know that staying at home, being cooped up, is a very difficult situation to cope with. But let's just hunker down together. This is something we do together. Nobody is special. Nobody has special treatment. So if we just tolerate this, we hope that this will go away as soon as we can see the improvements take place.
Right, let's hope for that as well. So
yes,
the weight of your ministry's responsibilities is growing, from crowding in parks to keeping an eye out for safe distancing deviants. And the Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources may have more in its periphery in the near future with the evolving rules under the circuit breaker. So, Minister, how are you coping with the heavier, thicker portfolio?
Well, we are a good team. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do and the purpose of their work. Everyone understands that by putting in their part, we can ensure that the circuit breaker measures are being observed by everybody, and that those very few who are on the road know that we will deal with them, and that they should not be defying the law.
Well, some people say the extension of the circuit breaker is not just about community spread numbers, but also about breaking people's bad habits and forming new ones for the long term. What do you think? How true is that?
Well, firstly, we extended and also tightened the safe distancing measures, basically to bring down the number of interactions in society even further. We have seen the numbers of infection in society stabilizing, but that's not good enough because there is always this cluster moving around invisibly. We don't know where they are, who they are. Therefore, the best way to do this is to ensure even more people stay home. And that's what we are trying to achieve. So we hope that, like we see in many other countries, when the numbers go down to single digit or even zero, we can slowly lift the restrictions and then go back to normal. I think this is the message we are giving to people. We are not there to curb people's freedom. We are there to ensure that all of us come out of this alive and healthy.
Right. Well, Minister Masagos, it's been slightly more than 2 months since the SG Clean campaign was launched. The SG Clean Taskforce was announced on March the 6th. What inroads have both the campaign and task force made since then in raising hygiene standards across Singapore? What examples can you give us?
Well, I'm happy that many people now understand the need for better hygiene. Not only because good hygiene is good for us, but we have to always be ready for new, different kind of crises in decades ahead. So I'm glad that in the road to putting better hygiene standards. I've got very good feedback, even stakeholders embracing these measures. One of the things we will see now very visibly is that all our stall holders, F&B operators are putting on masks. And that's going forward, this is something we want to make permanent. And we want to ensure that this will be complied to very rigorously. And even now, we have been asking everybody to make sure they put their mask on when they're handling food. And if they don't, we will fine them.
Right. So you touched on this earlier, I guess, making certain measures more permanent, like hawkers and people in the F&B industry wearing masks. So when it comes to ingraining the importance of personal and public hygiene practices, do you think this mindset will last even after the COVID-19 outbreak?
Well, we know we have to do what we can do in terms of enforcement is at the cleaning companies. We have imposed standards, higher standards and frequency of cleaning on these companies, and we will maintain this beyond the COVID period. But like you mentioned, the real who really matters are ourselves. Whether we can change our habit in using these public places like toilets and hawker centers and so forth. I'm happy that the schools have made great inroads, made great improvements to inculcate good habits to their children. But I'm hopeful that most of us understand the need for better hygiene and improve our own habits in using public facilities like hawker centers and toilets.
In other news, the Health Ministry has suspended one of its officers after she allegedly leaked the number of new COVID-19 cases in Singapore and retrieved a patient's records without authorization. MOH added that it's now reviewing its processes to ensure that the necessary information security protocols are in place.
Meanwhile, the Singapore Tourism Board has set aside $22 million to help tourism businesses market their services and build demand when global travel resumes. Travel agents will also be allowed to use their reserves to make ends meet. The minimum financial requirement that agents must fulfill to keep their license has been reduced by 90% until the end of the year.
A total of 85 Singapore residents returned this morning from Saudi Arabia as the country suspends all commercial flight services. 40 of them are students studying in the Middle Eastern Kingdom. The remaining 45 are their dependents. The Foreign Affairs Ministry said that returnees will serve 14 days of self-isolation at dedicated stay-home notice facilities.
And a large COVID-19 facility being set up at Tanjung Pagar Terminal now could house up to 15,000 patients or foreign workers. It's part of a broader plan to ensure adequate space to meet future demand. Existing community facilities meant to house recovering patients and those with milder symptoms include Singapore Expo Day Resort in TUC in Pasir Ris and Changi Exhibition Centre.
Foreign workers in dormitories are still making up the bulk of the new cases, and their welfare continues to be of concern to all of us. We're joined by Mr. Bernard Menon, Executive Director of Advocacy Group Migrant Workers Centre. Now, Bernard, despite some complaints, the bigger dorms seem to have many safe distancing measures in place. What about factory-converted dorms, though, as well as those living at construction sites and other areas? These smaller, more isolated groups, are they slipping through the cracks? What are the concerns for the various groups and what is being done?
Okay, so the challenge for these smaller dormitory operations and facilities is that some can be very small. There's a wide range. They can house anywhere from 10 people to over 900 people. And the other challenge is that there are about more than 1,100 of these facilities, and they're scattered all over the island. So the logistical exercise in trying to manage COVID-19 related challenges is just exacerbated, magnified by the fact that they're so scattered. Having said that, I think the Migrant Workers Centre discussion with, of course, the government authorities and in partnership with many other ground-up outfits and NGOs, we've decided to focus our attention on the smaller dormitory facilities. These 1,100 odd housing facilities. I think managing COVID-19 related challenges, the priority for everyone concerned is to ensure that the basic, most urgent, immediate needs of the workers first addressed, and then only then we can start to direct attention towards safe distancing, watching your health, washing your hands, going to see a doctor, escalating it to medical professionals as soon as possible if you display any of the symptoms, challenges like those. So, addressing the basic essential needs, urgent needs, I think what we've done is, among all the organizations, we've kind of fanned ourselves out. Each organization taking charge of a particular area. In that respect, the Migrant Workers Centre, we've taken on the provision of essential items like laundry detergent, bath soap, hand sanitizers, toothbrush kits, shaving kits. These are all essential items that, without getting them addressed, it would be very difficult for the migrant workers not being able to keep themselves clean, showers, do those things. Very difficult for them to start concentrating on other things like safe distance, watching their health, washing their hands, and things like that. We have a partner organization, the Alliance of Guest Workers Outreach, that are working with us to handle all the emergency catering needs of migrant workers in instances where maybe their employers or their dormitory operators have not made arrangements for their catering and their food. We've also partnered with other organizations, other NGOs also, to go in and give like emotional, psychological counseling, and other basic needs. And the hope is that in helping the dormitory operators who tend to be of a smaller scale as compared to the bigger dormitories, help them deal and address such issues upfront. They will be able to then help workers that stay in their dormitories to start implementing measures on safe distancing and all those things I mentioned earlier.
Right. Well, Bernard, as of yesterday, 25 dorms were gazetted as isolation areas. Now, we spoke to another advocacy group, TWC2, last week on what more could be done. They suggested reducing the density of workers in each room, but building alternative accommodation and various related logistics also take time. So what do you think can be done in the meantime, especially more immediate measures?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. What needs to be done now, what is most urgent now, and that is what most of us are directing our attention. So like I said, on the essential items, on the food and catering, the boys in the migrant workers in the dormitories, the larger dorms, especially the gazetted dorms, I think it's a common knowledge that a multi-agency government task force is looking after the needs in those bigger dorms. A coalition, a partnership of NGOs and ground-up initiatives playing their part also to help address some of these same issues in the smaller type of facilities. But I think the important thing is, we came out of SARS and very soon after Foreign Employees Dormitories Act was enacted. And these standards for housing for migrant worker brothers have continued to be evolved over time, improved over time. So this includes spatial requirements for each worker, sanitary facilities, cleaning facilities, bath facilities, recreational facilities. All these things, if you track changes in the laws through time, especially over the last maybe 5-7 years, key improvements have been made. Basic standards, so they've continued to be raised over time. Many of these changes actually came into play because we remembered SARS. And I think one of the things many people don't really know of is the fact COVID-19 is really very unprecedented in the way it operates, in the way it spreads very, very easily, very, very quickly. And perhaps the way our dormitories were shaped not factor a fast-spreading virus like that. It's not to say that they did not have its fair share of pandemic response measures as requirements based on dormitory operators. But I'm sure, as like in the case of SARS, when we come out of this, I'm sure we will, if we stay together, united. When we come out of this, I'm sure there will be lessons and there will be more changes and improvements made. Most importantly, we need to focus on what's most urgent now, on taking care of the migrant workers in the dormitories, regardless of what dormitory type they live in, and helping them as much as we can, and making sure that look after them and stay together with us as a community. We all make through COVID-19.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Bernard, the Straits Times visited 3 dorms this week, including Singapore's largest active cluster, S11 dormitory at Punggol. The journalist spoke to some of the workers. Have you had a word with them as well? How are they coping in this difficult time?
Okay, so myself and a team of my colleagues, we were actually at S11 for 3 days after it was gazetted. One of the key reasons why we were there, even before the gazetting, because the Migrant Workers Centre, we have a grassroots network of migrant workers themselves, whom we call MWC ambassadors. You may have heard of these ambassadors in news reports over the last 2 weeks. In all, they number about 5,000. They're all migrant workers themselves, mostly more experienced migrant workers that have been here maybe 6 to 8 years and above. And the bulk of them stay in the dormitories. And what we did was we did a lot of engagement with them when COVID-19 began, and in the lead up to what has happened in the dormitories, we actually pre-engaged all of them, and the purpose of doing that was to help us disseminate information on safe distancing, personal hygiene, things like that. The migrant workers, they are key ambassadors and advocates for us on the ground. They help disseminate messages for us very often. In the lead up to the gazetting of the dorms, we also briefed them that there's a possibility this might happen. And if it were to happen and they were isolated in any way, then they would have a very big responsibility to help take care of their brothers within the dorm. We continue to remain in contact with them even after the FAST teams have been. And in fact, I think they are a key feedback channel for the multi-agency task force, trying to stabilize the situation on the ground, handle issues that may from time to time regarding food, regarding essentials, regarding mobile connectivity, all the basic items that needs to be addressed before you can start directing your mind or the migrant workers' attention towards themselves from COVID-19. So as we understand it, these issues have gradually stabilized in the last 2 weeks. Multi-agency task force has been taking our feedback generated from the ambassadors on the ground and addressing this situation systematically. A situation where today I think most of the presented norms, the situation has largely stabilized. There are still issues that come up from time to time, but we continue to provide feedback with the intention and the hope this will be addressed quickly so that we can start getting everyone concentrated on this COVID-19.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Bernard, for your time and for the work your organization does. We've been speaking to Bernard Menon, Executive Director of Migrant Workers Centre.
Thank you, guys.
Looking overseas, across the causeway, Malaysia extended its movement control order once more by another 2 weeks until May 12th. The order, which began on March 18th, has been extended twice before. It was initially scheduled to end next Tuesday, April the 28th. Although Malaysia has seen a decrease in infections, Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin said that steps have to be taken until the pandemic is completely under control. He did not discount the possibility of a further extension.
Similarly, the Philippines extended Manila's lockdown until May 15th. The capital city accounts for more than two-thirds of the country's nearly 7,000 cases. President Rodrigo Duterte also offered a reward of 50 million pesos or $986,000 to any Filipino who creates a vaccine.
And Indonesia announced a temporary ban on both domestic and international air and sea travel to prevent a further spread of the virus. The ban begins today and will see air travel suspended until June 1st and sea travel until June the 8th. Exceptions to the ban include cargo as well as flights to repatriate Indonesian and foreign citizens. Over in the U.S., this week has seen the reopen protests hit a new level of intensity, fueled by the apparent belief that COVID-19 is no worse than the flu and that the measures are unnecessary. Ironically, the state of Kentucky saw its highest spike in cases after a weekend of such reopen protests. So let's bring in U.S. Bureau Chief for the Straits Times, Nirmal Ghosh, to discuss this. Nirmal, there are currently close to 890,000 cases in the U.S. Total deaths have crossed 50,000, and that is with social distancing measures. Now, some are suggesting that states reopening could be truly disastrous for the U.S. What's your take?
Right, so here is the most likely scenario going forward past, say, May 1. We will have a situation where the virus is still raging and a lot of the country is still under some form of stay-at-home orders, or there are restrictions on public gatherings. A lot of work from home will continue. We will have regional hotspots, but the rest of the country gets back to a sort of new normal in which there is still mandated social distancing. For instance, New York City has cancelled major events through June. There will still be some fear of crowded spaces because the virus will still be around. Right now, while we have seen some governors and mayors wanting to get back to normal, and we've seen some protests against restrictions, these are small protests. Polls show that the majority of Americans are worried about opening too fast. So things will get better in the summer as testing and contact tracing reaches a critical level and we know what is going on with this virus. But there's a possibility of a new wave in October or November.
While the damage may already have been done to local economies, there are genuine concerns over the ability of small businesses to survive. Now, a $484 billion coronavirus aid deal is expected to help boost small business loan programs, but is it coming in time?
Good question. At best, it may be just in time for many, but it is a fact that a lot of small businesses will not survive. If you own a restaurant, for example, even if you open again, there may be seating restrictions. Revenue streams won't reappear overnight. Your whole business model may be gone. Likewise, small businesses dependent, say, on the service industry or on components from a supply chain that may be disrupted. Now, there are serious questions as well over who got the assistance the first time around. It was big business that got a lot, and banks apparently prioritized applications of their wealthiest clients before turning to other loan seekers. But there has been some blowback. At least 3 national restaurant chains have given back their assistance. So administering this, implementing it equitably and to the benefit of those for whom it is intended will continue to be a challenge as well.
Well, Nirmal, both President Donald Trump and former VP Joe Biden appear to be playing the blame game using China. Is taunting China a short-sighted move for the man expected to lead the U.S. out of a post-COVID-19 slump in 2021?
Yes, well, President Trump is playing to his base and Joe Biden is trying to out-Trump him in a sense, playing to the center-right of American politics. So blaming China is now quite bipartisan. Perceptions of China had turned negative even before this. And there is a very real phenomenon, not widespread, you don't see it all over, but there have been many more instances than usual of racism-tinged bullying or abuse of Chinese Americans or people who may just look like ethnic Chinese. Now, in terms of geopolitics, the bottom line is the perception of China as a problem and a threat is going to persist. It is now part of the mindset in DC, it's part of the strategic establishment, and this crisis will spur more efforts to de-link crucial supply chains from China. But there are limits to that because American companies also want the China market. So taunting and insults is obviously not the most constructive way to manage this relationship because it stokes ultra-nationalist responses on either side. But political considerations in both countries mean it is going to be the norm for at least this year as the political campaign here at least gets back on track. And while that domestic aspect is understood, certainly it risks getting out of hand to a degree.
Well, thank you so much, Nirmal. That was our U.S. Bureau Chief, Nirmal Ghosh, joining us from Washington, D.C.
An estimated 1.8 billion Muslims around the world began observing Ramadan today, a somber affair this year for many amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Unprecedented bans on mass prayers and family gatherings have put a damper on spirits in nearby Indonesia and Malaysia, where national religious organizations have called on the faithful to stay home. Similarly, Saudi Arabia announced that the two holy mosques in Mecca and Medina will remain closed throughout Ramadan.
But some territories have waved off fears. Several thousand worshippers attended evening prayers yesterday at the biggest mosque in Indonesia's Banda Aceh, although crowds were smaller than usual.
In Pakistan, while most clerics have complied with the shutdown, several prominent imams have rallied their devotees to ignore the safe distancing measures. Dozens had signed a letter demanding the Pakistan government exempt mosques from the shutdown during the holy month or invite the anger of God and the faithful. On Saturday, the government gave in, allowing mosques to stay open for Ramadan as long as they followed 20 rules. These include forcing congregants to maintain a 6-foot distance, bring their own prayer mats, and do their ablutions at home.
And how will Singapore's Muslim community observe Ramadan during the circuit breaker period? Earlier today, I posed this question to Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, Masagos Zulkifli. The circuit breaker has been extended until June the 1st. It affects the entire Ramadan period, which begins today, as well as Hari Raya festivities on May 24th. What was the community's reaction to the measures, especially the unprecedented step to close mosques?
I'm very happy that our religious sector, the religious scholars, are always aligned and understand the need to issue instructions and guidance based on medically sound advice. And very much earlier on, even before other countries effected the closure of mosques, scholars in Singapore agreed unanimously to do so ahead of everybody else. And for the Ramadan and also for the coming up Hari Raya, the same guidance have been given by the same group of scholars very respected in the society, and that's calling our community basically to adapt and to also do our part to contribute towards the safe distancing that we have to implement for the safety of everybody else.
Has the spirit or the mood of Hari Raya also changed with the cancellation of the iconic Geylang Serai Bazaar this year?
Of course. These are the things we all in Singapore look forward to. You know, I think when I go to Geylang Bazaar, it's not just Muslims and young, but everybody, old and young, and even our non-Muslim friends.
Exactly, I have been there myself.
Enjoy it. Yes, and you get the best kind of food and different kind of food during this time. So we have to adapt, and some of these bazaar owners have now put their goods on e-platform, and if they are not constrained in the delivery of these goods, we can certainly still participate in some form of bazaar shopping, but in a different kind of bazaar.
Right. So, how do you feel about your own Hari Raya plans being disrupted, Minister?
Well, the most important thing is that I have to make sure my mom understands that I shouldn't be visiting her, and that we will do our usual greetings via video. She's getting used to it, but you know, old people, they have very strong habits. That's hard to change, but I'm glad she understands. The same thing goes for everybody. So I hope we know that everybody's adjusting. Everybody needs to accept this new norm, and I'm sure that, and I hope that this is the only time we ever have to do this.
Yeah, here's hoping. Well, churches in Singapore are streaming their masses and services online. How have mosques and other Malay Muslim organizations reached out to the community to offer assistance during this difficult period?
Indeed, the MUIS, Muslim Religious Council, has put together a number of online packages to help the community cope with the changes that we have to make in our life. For example, online donations, online lessons, even getting food delivered to those recipients of zakat, which are the needy. So all these kind of things have been put together, not only by MUIS, but also by many stakeholders in our community, including the Malay Chambers, the various Malay Muslim organizations, all coming together in the spirit of gotong royong to help us cope with this period.
Right, Minister, before we wrap up this conversation, do you have a message for those in the Malay Muslim community here as they observe the fasting month?
Well, my message to everybody observing the Ramadan is simply this: we should really be thankful that our country, by and large, have got through this period of crisis well, and we will together get out of this. During the Ramadan, the most important thing is to observe fasting as well as to give alms to the poor. This is the fundamental acts of worship in Ramadan. Beyond that, we have to adapt and adjust to the new norm and take the opportunity to pray with our families at home and build good relationships going forward.
And you can watch the full interview with Minister Masagos on our YouTube channel. Before we go though, Jan, I understand you of course have been working from home for the entire week. How has that been for you?
I think the experience is quite nice actually, and I'm quite glad that I get to spend the first day of Ramadan at home. So I'm just waiting for breakfast time, which is in about 30 minutes or so.
Yep, it's coming up shortly.
Yeah, but next week we're going to do a switch. So it's you back at home.
That's right. Can't wait.
I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah.
Now there we have it, our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do log on to straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. We'll see you on Monday. In the meantime, have a good weekend.